Hi, I'm Daniel and I will be talking about the Green Kangaroo Game made for iPhone. It was made by me, Greg and James. So Greg will be talking about the game idea and how the concept came, how he created the game design and how to balance the economics of the game. Then James will be talking about the graphics, how the graphics were created and how we adapted that into how we imported that to the iPhone. And then later I'll be talking about some programming, how the programming was organized and some issues we had during this stage.
Obrigado, Daniel. Green Kangaroo is a game we like to call an environmentalist Tamagotchi, in that it blends Ike Maita's very popular Tamagotchi gameplay along with an environmentalist twist. Our game design goal that we all came up with was that we wanted the player to have fun but also realize their impact upon the environment. And now I'll go through some of the other concepts of the game design. Cool, so upon making players understand their impact upon Australia's ecological and biological environment, the game concept arose. The first thing was, as I mentioned, we're inspired by Ike Maita's Tamagotchi, which is a virtual pet game. And upon having a virtual pet game, you need to have ways you can interact with your pet. Also, along with having this Tamagotchi gameplay, we also decided to have an environmental quiz gameplay aspect, which would separate the game overall. So overall, as I mentioned before, our aim was to have accessible gameplay with an environmental twist. So, onto the Tamagotchi gameplay within Green Kangaroo. Green Kangaroo overall aim, or the main game mechanics, are balance. The player has to balance their environment, the kangaroo's mood, and the kangaroo's health. The player can save the environment through planting a tree. The player can make their kangaroo happy through playing on the iPhone, playing Green Kangaroo in fact, drinking beer, don't ask why we chose PB, boxing, and even playing the didgeridoo. However, one of the most important aspects of Green Kangaroo is that the game is all about balance. So it brings in this environmental twist in that if you play the iPhone, you'll have the most fun, but if you play the iPhone as well, it will also damage the environment more. So if you instead play the didgeridoo, which has a little environmental impact, you'll have fun and you won't damage the environment. As well as having these little interaction bits, we also have health. And this is where it gets a little bit science fiction in that a kangaroo can eat steak. That's okay, as long as it boosts the health. And we also have Vegemite on toast, I think, or bread. And we have steak and we have health pills. But once again, there's balance. If you take the health pills, it's going to damage the environment, but it will boost your health significantly. And the next step of the gameplay is the questions. The questions indeed are immersion breaking in that they break the flow of the player. So when they're playing the game, it means that they'll be interacting with their pet, but then a question will flash on screen. However, this is intentional because it means the player has to break their mindset from playing a game and begin to think about the environment and their impact on the environment. And the other ways we decide to do this, which Daniel, James and I came up with, are to show the impacts on the screen. In that we have a fun meter on the right hand side of the screen, that when it's at the top the kangaroo is having fun and when it's at the bottom they're not. And we also have a environmental impact which is shown through smog, which is an ingenious idea by Daniel, in that the screen greys up and once it gets pitch black you know you're in smog, so you need to plant a tree to make it clean. And finally we have health. If the kangaroo goes green, it's a fairly universal understanding that your kangaroo will die. And last but not least, the most important thing of all is your kangaroo can and will die if you damage the environment and you don't look after it. And now James will talk about the animation and a bit more of the technicalities.
Hi. The animations for Green Kangaroo were made using Adobe Flash and then exported to a sequence of PNG images for use on the iPhone. We use Flash because it's so easy to draw and animate images to look clean and smooth, and with the kind of cartoony look we wanted for the game. But due to the iPhone not currently supporting Flash animations, we had to export the animation to a series of PNG images, one for each frame of the animation, which was then used by our OpenGL framework, which Daniel will talk about, to recreate the animation sequence for the iPhone. We initially created the animations for 60 frames each, running at 30 frames a second, but we soon discovered that with multiple animations loaded, the iPhone quickly began to run out of memory. We fixed this by changing each animation to 40 frames each, running at 25 frames a second. This also allowed us to load the animations dynamically with only a bit of lag on the first couple of seconds rather than completely freezing the game.
Okay, I'm going to briefly describe how we organize the development of the code. First, using the game design document, we created a class diagram trying to identify the components of the game. With that in mind, we created a very simple prototype. It was it was like bad quality code, but was just to ensure that we could implement what we wanted, especially the animations. And then we created the main engines. We created the graphics engine that controls all the OpenGL functions, and a screen engine that has all the objects and how they respond to the inputs. And we had the sound engine. We didn't have an input engine because this is actually controlled by the screen engine. And then we have the graphics using OpenGL ES, which is a subset of OpenGL. One of the differences, for example, is that all the images they must have sizes in power of 2. For example, 32 by 32 pixels or 64 by 64. Memory and processor are really constraining, and we have to be careful when using the iPhone simulator, because many times the iPhone simulator is running fast and perfectly, but actually the real iPhone is going to be very slow. Another thing, we had once we had the engines working, we started working different screens at the same time. We tried to use the way iPhones operates, so whenever we could, we would use the UI, the user interface default components, because that's how iPhones operates and how people are used to it. Even though it's said that like it's an OpenGL performance issue, if you mix them both, we think it didn't affect our game, like at least not in a noticeable way. At last, Objective-C can be very similar to Smalltalk and C++, but in some way, but in the other way it can be very different way of thinking and programming. For example, especially if you're using for iPhone, one example is that memory, we cannot use garbage collection memory management on iPhone, and we have to be careful and worry about memory all the time. Also, the syntax in Objective-C and the way the compiler works, very permissive. So many times it tries to fix and understand your errors. It fails most of the times, leading like it leads to few compile errors. For example, if you use a function that doesn't exist, it creates the default function for you that returns null and accepts no arguments, but most of the time it's a typo, and it would be better to have the error so you could just fix. And not having all these errors and compiling it ends up with more crashes, and then we have to try to find where's the mistake that we couldn't get it at compile time. Okay. So this ends our talking about the Green Kangaroo, our iPhone game. Feel free to contact us at any time if you have any questions, and thank you.